Hi and welcome to this DCP Lost World Blender 2.9 tutorial. So let's go ahead and open up Blender. In all honesty, this tutorial I'm going to completely freestyle it, so I'm not really sure how this is going to come out, but we're just going to have some fun and do something in Blender. So I'm going to go ahead and click on General. So we've got our general scene set up here. I'm using Blender 2.9, so make sure you download the latest version so that you can follow this tutorial. And we're just going to save this Blender file. Let's call it Lost World -01. Let's save that. And we'll click on this cube and delete it. But before I do anything else, let's turn on some screencast keys for you, so you can see the key presses down here, what I'm pressing. So I'm going to click on this cube and hit the delete key to delete that. I want the camera on this side, so I'm going to middle mouse click and rotate around so I can see the camera here, right? And then we know our X and Y is going to be set up correctly for our scene. So what I want to do is get this light source and delete it. I'm going to go into edit and preferences, and inside preferences I'm going to turn on orbit around selection, perspective and depth. I'm going to turn on these three options here for now. We might turn them on and off as and when we need them. So let's go into preferences, navigation, turn these three on, and then in the add-ons I'm going to type in land, L-A-N-D, land, and then turn on this add mesh, A.N.T Landscape. So I'm going to close that. Let's just go to file, save, press shift A and insert a landscape. So we've got a little landscape here. It's not that great, is it? So let's go to here and we'll click here and we'll go to large terrain, and I want to set the mesh size for, not for the Y will be the width, right? I guess we could make it a bit wider, but I think this width should be fine. So I'm going to set the X, no, this is the Y. I'm going to set it to something like double the amount. Let's set it to 40. Right, so we've got this larger landscape, larger mass. In fact, we can probably set it a bit larger now. Let's set it to something like 80. So we've got this large block of land here, right? So I think that's okay. You can play around with the settings and tweak them and do whatever you want. You can play around, mess around with these settings, go and experiment with them, see what they do. But as default, I think it's pretty good. And we're going to subdivide this later just to tidy up the edges and make it look a bit better. Let's go ahead and click inside of the viewport. I'm going to press number 9. What is it? Number 7. Yeah, number 7 will take us into the top orthographic. I'm going to click on this, and we can see our cameras here. Right, and we want to bring this down, so let's click on the move tool. This is the move tool here. I'm going to hold down the control key, click on the green arrow, and if I hold down the control key, we can move in increments and we can snap it right across this red line here. I'm going to zoom out a bit more. I'm going to click on this landscape one more time, press shift and D, is it? Yep, shift and D, and hit enter. That will duplicate the land, so we've got 2 copies. I'm going to hold down the control key and drag it down so it snaps here as well, and then we're going to middle mouse click. Let's just zoom in here, and we can see some sort of, you know, overlapping here that we need to kind of tidy up a little bit. I'm going to click on the move tool. Let's just go into edit, preferences, and go into let's see, where is it, navigation, and let's just turn off depth and orbit around selection for the moment, and let's close this. This will just make our life a little bit easier. I'm going to click the green arrow and drag it across to about here, somewhere around here, and then if we were to pan across and have a look here, we can see like these gaps. Maybe we'll turn on our wireframe. Let's just see what's going on here. So let's go back to solid view, and really I want to try and flatten some of these edges so they kind of, you know, merge a bit better together. So let's click on the land in the back here. Let's go into edit mode, and then we can see the vertices that are sitting quite high up. So these ones around here, around here, around here, maybe a few at the back. So we're just going to drag them down. So let's left click outside and then press number 7. That will take us into the top orthographic, and we've got the vertices select here, so that's enabled. I'm going to left click and select just that first row there at the beginning, the first row, right, just these ones here. Then we can middle mouse click, rotate around, and use the move tool, and we can just drag them down just to kind of blend those together, blend that in a little bit better, right? It just won't look so rubbish. It looks a little bit rubbish still, so let's maybe select a few more, like around here, and let's drag those down a bit as well to try and get it to blend a bit better. I think that's a bit better there. And we'll select maybe these ones here, you see they're sticking out of the surface. We don't really want that, so let's drag these down, and we'll select it's better to go into top orthographic number 7 key, and you can kind of grab these vertices a bit easier. In fact, we'll grab this rogue one over here as well. Let's grab these few here, and let's just drag them down. I think that's going to look okay. Maybe just these few here as well. These ones here. Just get rid of them. So really they're sticking down here, can you see? But we'll never see that. And that's just going to tidy up our landscape as we fly over it. It's not going to have these like big gaps in it. It's going to look a bit rubbish. We don't want that. So that looks a lot smoother now. It should be okay. I mean, you can see the gaps on this side, but we're going to fly over that, so we're not really going to notice any of that when we fly over it. Sure, there's a better way to do that, but that should be okay. We just don't want to see these gaps here. See these gaps here, like here and here, you can see. We don't want to see it on this side because we're going to fly over it. So as long as we don't see it on this side, we're good to go. So let's look at this landscape. This looks okay. I want to really make this a bit longer. Just press number 7. Let's click back on this bottom one, press Shift and D to duplicate it one more time. We're going to hold down the control key and drag it down again, and then that should snap here. We can just check this one over here. Let's just see what it looks like. I think we'll get away with that as well. When we fly over it, should be okay. Okay, so let's zoom back out. So we've got a pretty long landscape here, right? Going on here. So I want to try and center out the camera in the viewport. So let's try and center it out somewhere around here, and then press Control Shift and A. That brings the camera to this view, and we want to just position this camera a bit better. So let's click on the camera, will help, and then let's bring it forward a touch. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it forward a bit more. Let's bring it down. We want it like a nice point to start with, somewhere around here, and then we can probably rotate it up a little bit. Let's set it to around 90. I reckon around 90 degrees, right? Straight on should be better, right? We want it pretty straight on. The Y we can set to 0. The Z we can leave it as it is. This is our height here, and this is the Z location. We can set that to 0. So we're going to kind of center it out. You can position it however you like. Let's go ahead and click on the camera, and let's go to our camera settings, and let's give it more focal length, right? I want to see more of a wide angle, but that also means we have to click back on here and move that camera a little bit more forward, somewhere around here. I want to bring it quite low because we want to fly over this landscape, but at the same time we're going to fly over the hills and do a few little bits in here, so it should be fun. So we want some little objects or something maybe we can fly through. So I was thinking like maybe there's some sort of like some sort of barriers or something that we can fly in between through this landscape. So I thought that would be something nice to create. So we can do that quite easily. Let's just go to File, Save, and File, Save As, and let's set this up as version 2. We'll save this, and here's our 3D cursor. So that's where we're going to add our next objects right here. Let's just zoom out, and we want to add a cylinder, I believe. Let's add a cylinder. So this is a cylinder here. You can actually hold down the control key and use your middle mouse button to zoom in onto these objects a bit easier, right? So if you just rotate your mouse wheel, it just goes a bit crazy because jumping in quite large increments. So hold down the control key and use your middle mouse button to zoom in onto the object that you're looking at. So this object here, it's got way too many sides, so we want to set it to something like 12 sides, right? We want this like hexagon sort of, not necessarily a hexagon, but we want it to be that sort of shape. And we want to rotate this as well. So let's press R to rotate. Let's press X and type in 90, so it's sitting down flat like this. And let's go to its properties. Let's see, we want to bring this in. It's too thick, so I'm going to set it to like 0.4. Now this is where, because we've got such a large scene, if we go up to Edit Preferences and then go into let's see, navigation and orbit around selection. Then when we click on a selection like this and we zoom in onto it, and when we middle mouse click, we'll rotate just around that object. This just makes editing a little bit easier in Blender, right? When we're going to try and get to an object and manipulate it. So we want to get rid of this face. So let's click on the object itself, this shape. Let's go to edit mode. Let's go to face select. Click to unselect everything. Click on the face and hit the delete key. Delete the face itself and delete the one on the other side as well. So we'll click that and delete that face. We've got this kind of shape going on here. And then we want to solidify it. So we can use the modifier here to solidify. And we'll make it a bit thicker, like around maybe 12 sort of thickness, that sort of thickness. And we don't really want we could actually keep the whole object. I guess we could keep it and kind of bury it in underneath the scene. We don't really need to delete the bottom part. So maybe we just keep the whole thing. We could go into edit mode and cut all of this bottom part out because we don't really need it, but at the same time we're going to kind of bury it inside of this landscape anyway, so I don't think it really matters too much. But we want it to be a bit bigger, so let's press S to scale and let's scale it up. And then it's already on like the midpoint here, right? You can see it's already like half cut already. So what we can do is just drag it to maybe around here. Let's just zoom in on this landscape and let's see. I think somewhere around there should be okay. So let's press 0 on our keyboard. Let's go back into our camera view. You can kind of see this shape here now, right? Buried, but I think we can bring it up a bit more, maybe to about here, something like this, and we'll fly through these like I don't know what you want to call them, barriers, whatever you want to call them. This one's a bit close to the camera. In fact, let's look through the camera view. So this is the camera view. It's pretty far away, it's not too close, but I reckon we can move it a bit more. So let's just drag it a bit further back, and then we're going to add quite a few of these, and we're going to fly through them, and maybe we'll position them around here, like left and right and so forth, just to make a bit of make it a bit different. So we've still got the thickness here that we can manipulate. I think it's a little bit thick, so maybe we'll set it to something like 0.1. I think that should be okay. And let's just take the camera quickly, and we've got the z-axis here, or the let's see, we want to move across the y. Let's move it forward, and we can kind of see what it will look like if we were to fly through it. Yeah, I reckon that's looking pretty good. The camera kind of fits nicely through there, and it looks a bit abstract and a bit different, and we're going to make this glow or do something quite interesting. So that's quite a nice way to see if that size is quite good. If it was too small, then the camera might not go through it that well, look a bit shit, excuse my language, but this looks okay, right? So let's go ahead and save this again. Let's save it as a new file. And you're probably asking me, why am I keep saving all of these files? I like to save like loads of different files. They're not very large files, so as we're working in Blender, if we want to go back and do something different, we've got older versions of these scenes that we can just go and manipulate later. So really we want to add our lighting now, so that when we create our materials for our land and stuff like that, we can see how the lighting is going to behave. So let's go into the shading here. Let's go into our world settings, and in our world settings we want to add a mix shader right here. Then we want to add a volume, so shader, volume scatter. We're going to leave that here. We're not going to, could connect it now, but we're going to connect it in a moment. And then we want to add a texture. Oops, not this one. We want a texture. So to add these nodes, I'm pressing Shift and A, and then environmental texture. So every element I'm adding, I'm using Shift and A key. Shift and A. So we want to do a let's see. We need vector mapping, and we also want texture, import texture coordinates. So let's connect these, and then we want a light path here. So there is camera ray. Let's zoom out a little bit here. We have to zoom out. use the mouse wheel to zoom out. There is camera array. We're going to connect that all the way over to the factor here. So you've probably seen me set this up quite a few times before in other tutorials. This will be our environmental lighting. So let's press 0 in this viewport up here. We're going to click and then press 0 because now we can see what the camera sees. Right now we're using like Blender's internal HDR maps in here, right? So you can click on any of these and you can see your scene in all of these different HDR maps that are built directly into Blender. But we're going to download some now that we're going to use. So you can see your objects in different lighting in here as well if you choose to do so. So we're going to click on render view. It goes all crazy, don't worry about that. I'm going to minimize this. Let's open up the web browser and we want to go to HDR Haven. So in here we're going to create a new folder, call it HDRI, and then we're going to go to HDRI Haven. So that website has been renamed to Poly Haven. It used to be called HDRI Haven, so I always type that in, but it's called Poly Haven now. And here's the HDR maps, but they've got textures and they've got other things in here that you can play around with. So go and experiment with them. Got some really nice like PBR textures and stuff like that. So really nice website. And feel free to donate. I've made a little donation before, so donate some money. These guys are doing some good things. I'm gonna click on that, and I'm gonna download my favorite HDR map. I do like this one. It's this one here. So I'm gonna middle mouse click on it, so it opens up in a new tab, and then we'll pick a few other ones from here as well, just to see how the lighting will appear in these different HDR maps. So depending on the lighting in here is going to affect your scene quite a lot, right, in terms of the lighting in your scene. So you have to experiment with a few different ones and see which ones work well for you. Let's see, medium contrast. Maybe we'll take, in fact we've got 3 here, so that's enough for now. And we can grab some more later if we want to come back and grab some more, or grab as many as you like. So I'm going to click on this one. You need to make sure it's set to HDR and 4K should be sufficient. And we'll click download, and then do the same on the next one, download, and then do the same on this one as well, download. So you've got these 3 downloads. Let's drag them into this folder, keep things organized. It's always a nice thing. And we'll close this for now. We can come back and look at some more maps possibly later. So let's go back and open up Blender, and we'll click open here on the environmental texture, and we'll select the Shanghai one. You can select any one that you want, and we'll enable that. So this is actually the lighting from that map, but you can't really see much because we don't have any sort of textures applied to our landscape here. So let's actually add some material to this landscape. So we'll click on the landscape, and let's go to our object settings, and we're going to click new here. This is a new material for this land. It's called land, this one here. I'm just going to middle mouse click and drag this across, and let's just call this material land. Let's just call it land. That's what it is. It might be worth, I don't think we need to, but let's see this cylinder. Let's just give it a name. Let's call it tunnel, 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 and this can be land 01. This can be land 02. And this one can be called landscape 03. Strangely enough, they're not ordering alphabetically because there's a dot in there. If you get rid of the dot, then they'll order in numerical sequence because they are in that sequence 1, 2, 3 because we copied it 3 times, remember? So let's click on landscape 1. This is the material, and we want to add a bump map to this, right? So we want to do a vector bump map which will connect to the normal here, and then we want to add a texture which will be a noise texture. Play around with the textures, choose different ones. We're going to use a noise texture, connect the factor to the height here, and you can kind of start to see what's going on in here. But what we really need to do is boost up the metallic and then bring down the not the specular, bring down the roughness, bring that right down to something like this. You can see it's quite jagged and the edges ain't that great because we're going to later, you can leave it like that if you like the landscape like that in that style, then by all means leave it. It actually looks pretty cool, but we're going to add some texture to this. So we're going to scale this up, and we're going to add more detail. Alright, so we want it to look like rock, and we can play around with the roughness, and then the color, the base color here, let's bring that right down to a dark color. We want it to be like black rock almost, right? And you can play around the roughness here, and that's going to affect how this is all lit up, right? So it's very rough, then you're going to get something quite plain. But I want these like colors to show through as well. Something like this. Let's see. So let's just go into our layout and go into here. We can take a little look at this. I think we're going to make some more fixes to this. This land doesn't look quite right, but for now it's okay, right? It's okay for the minute. So we want to add a material to this object back here. So we might as well do that now, because we're going to replicate it a few times. So we might as well add the material to it. Let's go ahead and click on material. Let's click here. Let's name it tunnel. That's what it's going to be, a tunnel. And we want to create an emission shader, and we'll set its value to maybe around 10. And I want to set it to like a sort of quite a bright turquoisey sort of blue color. And let's go into our render properties here. We want to turn on ambient inclusion, turn on the bloom. Now this is going to glow, and turn on screen space reflections. This is always a good thing. That's going to help out materials and stuff like that. And in our volumetrics, we want to turn on, let's set the tile size to 16 and turn on volumetric shadows. This is going to be useful a bit later. So let's just turn off our overlays, and now you kind of get an idea what this landscape looks like. And let's just quickly click on the camera again, click on its settings, and on the Y we can kind of fly through. And we're gonna kind of, when we animate this, we're gonna kind of dodge around these like objects, right? So we're gonna start maybe further back a bit, maybe about here, and then we'll fly through this scene, and we'll fly through these objects like this one here. We could, in theory, I don't know if it will work. Let's click on this. Let me try one thing. Click on this tunnel. Let's go to the modifier. Let's try and add a, I don't know if it will look any good. Let's try it though. It should be a wireframe in here somewhere. Let's find it. They've added a few extra things in here. I haven't used Blender for a while, so I'm a bit rusty. Wireframe. So we could have it like this wireframe here, and then we can increase the, let's see, even thickness. Do we want to fill it? It's not really what I'm looking for, to be fair. I mean, it looks pretty cool actually, but it's not really what we want. It actually looks pretty cool, but let's get rid of that solidify. Not solidify, wireframe. In fact, let's see. I was playing around with the solidify settings, yeah, instead of the wireframe settings. Let's get rid of this wireframe for a minute. We can see this object is way off key now. Let's just set it back, try and get it back to where it was. It's at 0.1, wasn't it? Yeah. And let's turn the offset here, even thickness, and then we want to let's see. Yeah, we want to fill this. Then we can actually stack these in different order. So if we go back and add the wireframe, we should in theory be able to drag this wireframe above here. Now you kind of get the wireframe, but it's been solidified, right? That's kind of what we wanted, something like this. Let's just look at it back through the camera view, and let's click on the camera. Let's go back. So this is kind of what will happen when we fly through it. So from a distance it looks just like some sort of bridge or something. When we get close to it, we'll see the gaps in there. Let's just click back on it, and let's see if this is the wireframe settings, right? Play around with these. That's what you got to do. You got to play around with stuff sometimes to see what works and what doesn't. Like I said, this is a freestyle tutorial. It's not one that I've pre-planned. I think I'm going to get rid of this wireframe. I'm just going to leave it as the tunnel like this. You go and play around with it. Go and experiment with it. See what you can come up with. And maybe you can do something better. Don't do exactly what I'm doing. It's all about experimenting and learning and making your own thing. Or you can do exactly what I've done. It's up to you. You know, entirely your choice. Anyway, I think that looks okay. I think the scene looks a bit better as well. The land looks better since we turn on some of these settings inside of our render properties over here, right? So we want volumetric lighting in here. So I want to try and get some volumetric lighting because we turn on the volumetric settings. So let's use some volumetric lighting as well. We can play around with the bloom a little bit later, the ambient inclusion. We've also got the screen space reflections in here. Half trace is really rubbish, so we should really turn that off. Yeah, turn off this half trace. Okay, so as you can see, there's quite a big difference between that. So let's add some volumetric lighting in here, and really I wanted to add a planet, right? So we're missing a planet. I wanted a big old planet in the corner over here. So let's press Shift A. In fact, let's middle mouse click out of here, and we'll get back to our registration point. Let's see, it's down here somewhere, right? So we do Shift A and add another landscape. It's added the default landscape that we selected last time, but we want to select in here. Where are you? Planet. So here's our planet. And remember, we can hold down the control key and use your middle mouse button to get close into these objects. And let's see this planet. Might be worth, when you're working in Blender, sometimes it's worth hiding some of these objects so you can just work with what you see. This is going to be our planet, and let's see. Pretty much all these settings are okay. I think it would be wise if we click on the landscape. Let's see, this will be called a planet now, wouldn't it? So let's call it a planet. Let's click on it, and I'm going to add, let's get back our landscape. Where is it gone? Here it is. I'm going to make this have the same material as the land. I want the land and the planet, but we're going to maybe tweak the planet's material separately a little bit. So we can click on this drop down and click land. When we click land, we can click this number 2. This number 2 will create a copy of that material that we can manipulate separately. So we click it, so now it's called land 001. You can see there's 2 different materials for the land in here now, yeah? They're separated rather than inheriting all of the assets from this land. It's got its own assets now. It just happens to be the same right now. So we should really rename this planet. And let's press, let's just try and move it a little bit. So let's press number 7. Let's just press G to grab it. And let's try and move it maybe around here somewhere. I'm going to move it around here. Then we can press 0 on our camera. We can kind of see it there. Let's move it up. And then let's press S to scale. Let's scale it right up. And then let's press 0 on our keyboard. And it's still very close, right? So we want to move it back further. Let's press 7, grab it and drag it way back, maybe even past this object here. Let's see where that looks like. That's probably a bit better. Let's press G to grab it and move it over to somewhere like here, and press S to scale it. Let's scale it up a little bit. and let's just press F12 and render. We'll kind of get an idea of what's going on here. Yeah, so we've got this planet, we've got these little shapes, we're going to fly through it. Maybe this planet will spin, maybe as we're moving the planet will move along with the camera. Maybe we'll try and get some stars, but we're going to do volumetric lighting anyway. So let's add a volumetric lighting, and then we can decide what to do after that. So let's press let's go into wireframe. Let's left click to unselect everything, press shift and A, and we want a light, and it's going to be a spotlight, and that's going to be way back here somewhere. Here it is. Let's just see. Here's our spotlight. Let's see, do we want a spotlight? Let's see, where are we? Spotlight. Let's get rid of that for me. I'm going to delete that. Let's press shift and A. Let's see. Point. Yeah, we do want a spotlight. So let's we want to rotate this spotlight so it's facing towards the camera. So we want to rotate it. Let's just turn back on our solid view, and let's see. Let's just turn back on all our gizmos and stuff. This one, yeah, this button here, show all overlays. That's what you want. Turn that back on. If you didn't turn it off, then you don't need to do anything. You should see it like this now, right? And you can see the actual spotlight. And we want to rotate it on the x-axis and point it towards the camera. So let's press R to rotate X and type in 90. Hit enter, and then let's press number 7, and let's drag that spotlight. Let's see. Let's move the spotlight. Did I rotate it back down again, didn't I? Okay, let's press R to rotate X 90, and then I want to grab it. So let's press G to grab, then Y, we can move it back. Let's move it up a little bit as well. So it should be pretty in line with the camera. Maybe it's going to hit some of this whatever this tunnel thing is. It's going to be behind the planet, somewhere around here. I think would be good, but I'm going to move it to the side a little bit. I don't really want it to be directly behind this object. We'll see. We might rotate and do a few things to it as well. Let's go into our render view. Let's save some of this stuff. Let's save this. Let's give it a version 4, and let's sort out this lighting in here. So let's go to our world settings, and we'll connect the volume, this volume scatter here. Then we want to make this very dark. Let's bring that down, increase the density, and let's move this up here. The strength, let's bring that right down to 0.05. Then let's go and click on our spotlight. Right now it's white. Let's set it to something crazy like 10,000, and let's change its color to like I'm gonna go for like a purple color, right? Purple. We can change the color later, it's not a problem. And let's play around with these settings to get the lighting the way that we want it to be. Let's see. So I want this to be way more powerful. Let's set it to like 40. Let's go into our layout view. Kind of get the idea. You've got this planet now. You can just about see it, but it's there. Let's click on the planet. Let's go into the shading. Let's go into our object data. This is the object data for that planet. You could change the base color a little bit, right? So you can play around with the base color. Maybe give it like a slightly different color. Try and keep it quite dark. You don't want it too bright, huh? It's gonna look a bit rubbish. So try and keep it dark. And let's get a bit closer to this planet. Let's see what we can do with this one. just play around with these settings until you see the planet you kind of like what it looks like, right? You can just experiment with this. This is for you to go and play with the settings, play with the roughness, play with the roughness settings. You kind of want this light to kind of be shining off of it a little bit as well. So let's see what that looks like in our layout. Kind of like that. I think that's pretty good. Let's go back into our shading, back into our world settings. Our world settings here. Let's see if let's just so make sure you're looking through the camera, because that's really what you're going to see, right? So we need to be looking through the camera. We might end up making this thing purple, I think, rather than blue. So if we click it, we can go over to its material. Maybe we'll make it like a, sometimes it's worth turning off the overlays. So turn off these overlays, and I want to increase its strength, make it pretty high, maybe around 200, so it proper glows, right? Because this volumetric lighting is going to affect it as well. So this lighting in here, let's see. So I think we want to keep the specular, because that's giving like this shine off of the rocks and stuff like this. Can you see if you turn it off and on, you can see the difference. This is going to be the volume, right? So we could animate this at the beginning or something, so it kind of fades in. We could animate this asset or this element. Blend is set to, what is this blend? The softness of the spotlight edge. So that doesn't seem to be doing too much. I'm just going to undo that, leave it as its default setting. And we want it to cast shadows as well. So really I think it's just a case of playing around with this setting here. Let's just see. I think just about here. What is that? So that's this value set to 0.010, the density is set to 1, and this setting here is set to 0.683. So I think that's just going to be about right, somewhere around here. I think it looks pretty good. Let's press F12 to render it, and you kind of get an idea of what's going on here. We've got the planet, we've got our rocks, we've got this whatever you want to call it, and we're going to fly through this scene, and we're going to try and keep this volumetric lighting tied to the camera, so as we fly, that lighting is always going to be there in the scene. So it's kind of like a misty sort of style, right? We've got the planet here. Whether we move the planet, I'm not sure. We might move it with the camera and rotate it as it's going along. We might improve that material there as well. I think it's not the best, but kind of getting there. Let's add some more, maybe some sort of object over here as well, maybe some sort of star or something, right? So I think maybe we'll add another volumetric lighting. Let's add a second one. So what we could do is just click on this spotlight, press Shift and D to duplicate it, and then grab it and drag it to the side over here. Let's drag it to this side over here. This lighting here, what we might do is just click on it. Let's just click on it. Where is it? Here it is. And rotate it. So X would be down, right? And we'll rotate it Y. Let's see. Let me try and get it facing the camera more, like about here. So it's right bang onto the, it's like pushing towards the camera. This one's kind of going off in this direction, which is fine. I'm going to click it, drag it down, so it kind of sits about here for now. And then let's go to its color. Let's change that a little bit to a, maybe like an orange or something. Alright, so now you've got this sort of shade. You can see how it's affecting the scene. Maybe we'll add a third color over here. So let's press Shift and D to duplicate, and we're going to drag it over to this side, like around here. And let's see, maybe like a sort of orangey. You can go crazy, right, with the colors and stuff, but we have to be a bit sensible here. So something around here, similar to the opposite side, right? So we've got these three colors across our scene. So somehow we're gonna have to parent these light sources, and as the camera moves, we want to move these light sources with the camera, so we can keep this consistent sort of color scheme in the background as we fly through this scene. So I need to think about how to do that. Not quite sure, but we'll work it out. Okay, so let's save this. I think it's looking pretty good. Let's save this file, save as version 5. Okay, so we actually downloaded a few different HDR maps, if you remember. So we're going to our shading. Right now we're using this Shanghai one. It's called Shanghai. So we click the open folder, we can actually click on these other maps and we can see what the lighting, how it affects the lighting. So if you notice, like the colors here, we've got like purples, and it's quite dark on this side. And if you click on this one here and then open it, you'll notice that it changes the scene. Can you see? Changes it because the lighting from that HDR map is different. So we click on the first one up here, we'll see again it will change slightly. So this HDR map, it may be a little bit tricky to understand, but if this is camera array, it's connected to the factor over here. If I remove it temporarily, you can actually see the map in the background. You'll probably see that. What you can do actually is the generated here is connected to the vector, and in this drop down you can select normal. You can actually rotate the map. So if I start rotating this map around, you can actually see the map in the background of this scene. This scene was quite dark, but if I get over to like around here, it was like grass in this scene. In this HDR map there was actually grass. You can maybe see it here somewhere, maybe some grass or some green lighting. So when I press 0 on my keyboard, you can see the greens coming through now, right? I'm rotating this map around, and that's providing the lighting in the scene. So you can actually see the green appearing on the side of the planet here. And if I open up this Shanghai one and open that, you'll probably see it a lot clearer because this was a much brighter image. And as we rotate this one around to like this sort of position, you can see this building, you can kind of see those colors in the scene. Alright, so you can go around and play around with the HDR map, just rotate it to see what colors work well for you. For now, I reckon the 0 value, just the default value where it's positioned, looks pretty good. I want it to be quite dark, I don't want it to be too light. So we need to connect the is camera array back up to the where is it gone? Back up to the factor here, and that will hide the HDR map in the background, but still the objects will inherit the lighting from it. Just wanted to show you that quickly. So now you can go back to that HDR website and you can download loads of other maps and experiment with them and add them into your scene and see how they affect the lighting in your scene, right? Play around with it, go and experiment. That's the best way to learn, like usual. So what we want to do now is really place these objects, these cylinders if you want to call them, or these gates, throughout our scene, because we're going to fly through the scene, so we might as well position them out. Let's press number 7. In fact, really what we need to do is click on this map, or sorry, this landscape here, this landscape, and we're going to go to the material, click on the drop down and select land, so they all have the same material. We'll click this one and we'll click land for that one as well. Now all of the lands have that same material. We can click on this object, press Shift and D, then hit enter, and then we're going to hold down the control key. We can move in increments with the control key, and we're going to move them apart maybe somewhere like this sort of distance, right? I reckon, like, you know, like this block here, I'm trying to move it to the middle point of this block right here. And let's just zoom out because we can see we've got a bit of distance to go. So let's press Shift and D and hit enter, and we're trying to move it similar sort of distance. Now you can see the increments, right, to about here. And we can select both of these, hold down the Shift key and select both of them, press Shift and D to duplicate, hit enter, hold down the control key, and now we've got 2 of them to move at the same time, which will save us a tiny bit of time. Let's press 0, and now you can see the tunnels, right? We might shift them a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. Maybe we should do that right now. Let's click on this one, let's just drag it to the side a little bit, drag this one to the side a little bit. So when we fly through, we're kind of flying through at different angles and kind of a bit of fun, rather than it being just a simple straight line. And then that will also show in the scene. So a nice way to just test that is just to let's see, what is this one? This is spot. This is going to be the spot, right? This one is the spot. Try and label these things. Oh, it's worth doing, because you'll never know which one is which. Spot, middle, and the tunnels we can just call them 1, 2, 3, 4 because they're going that sequence anyway. So let's go to our camera and let's click here, and then we can drag the Y forward, and we'll kind of see what's going on here when we fly through the scene. Like this. We could leave it dark and not have the volumetric lighting as we fly through it, but I kind of think having that volumetric lighting in the background will be nice as well. It adds a nice color to the scene, and this looks a bit too dark and a bit too boring, but we'll fly through all of these. So let's just get back to where we started, all the way back here. Let's see, around here. So I want some sort of object in the background up here, because it looks pretty plain over here. So maybe we'll add like a little sort of star, something to symbolize a star. So let's press, we could just use the planet and be lazy, right? Should we be lazy? Let's just use the planet. Let's press Shift and D to duplicate it. Let's drag it over here to this side. Let's press S to scale and scale it all the way down to some tiny little dot. Let's go to its material and let's create a new material, and we'll name this one star, and we'll name this planet star, and in the material we'll set it to a emission shader, and let's give it a crazy number like 300, and that should glow. Let's turn off our overlays, and you can kind of, let's turn off the overlays. Where are your overlays? This is overlays, right? Show overlays. I should really hide that, right? Alright, we'll turn off the gizmos things as well. This gizmo thing. So the object is actually selected. It's here. Let's press G to grab it and move it down a little bit, maybe around somewhere around here. And let's see. Maybe bring its strength down a bit to around here. And we can change its color to like this bright sort of pink color. And there'll be like some little planet in the distance. Here's that one that's quite close. And that just adds a little something to the scene in the background there. We're going to have to, don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to have to try and attach a lot of these objects to our camera. So when we move our camera, a lot of these things will move with it, like the planet, this little object here, and all of our lighting will move across the scene as we turn and do all the good stuff. It's going to move with us. So we'll figure that out. I'm pretty sure there's a way to do it. So we'll figure that out in a moment. Okay, so we want to really have the planet here, this planet, this little star shape, and all of these light sources to rotate when we move our camera. So to do that, we need to add an object that we can parent all these objects to. So when we rotate that parent or move it, the camera, the planet, and everything else will move along the scene with it. So to do that, let's just go to Edit, Preferences, and let's just turn off Orbit Around Selection. And we can just middle mouse click and rotate around, and we've got our 3D cursor here. So let's press Shift and A, and we're going to insert an empty, and it's going to be an empty sphere. So we've got this empty sphere, and I really want to get that sphere so that it surrounds this camera here. Yeah? So we can see the camera here, we can see the empty that's surrounding it. Let's just see if we can see this in wireframe, maybe we'll see a bit better. So now we can see the camera here, and we've got that empty that surrounds it. Yeah, surrounds it just like that, and it's all centered out already from the original camera position. So it's nice and centered, this sphere. As we rotate it, it should be pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered, but we'll try and get it as centered as possible. Maybe if we let's see, we've got quite a lot going on in this scene, haven't we? So these are our, that's our tunnel. Where's our land gone? Let's try and turn off some of this land and turn off these tunnels for the minute. So we can probably bring this sphere down a little bit. Let's see, where is it? Empty. and we can drag it down, try and get that registration point in the center of the camera, because when we rotate it, it will just rotate a bit better, just a little bit better, nothing too major. But we can turn all this stuff back on, and let's rename this empty controller. Let's see, now let's go back into our render view, and we want to attach these objects to this controller. So we want the planet, so I'm going to click on this planet here, hold down the control key and click on the star. So now the planet and the star is selected, and I'm going to select all of the spotlights. So now we've got all of these objects selected. I'm going to select the camera, and most importantly I'm going to select the controller last. If I select the controller last, that one stays this orange, like a bright orange, and the rest of them stay the darker orange. I'm going to move my cursor to the viewport and press Control and P. Control and P, set to parent object. So now all of these objects are contained inside of the controller here. They all sit inside. It's a bit like a collection, right? The reason we've done this is now if we press 0 on our keyboard to see the camera, and if we zoom in, and if we press something like R to rotate and Y, so we rotate on the Y axis, now the planet and all of the lighting, so R to rotate and Y, everything will rotate with it, like the star in the background. You could have like 10 stars in the background if you wanted, but as we rotate and fly through this scene, everything's going to move with it, right? So if we press escape, let's just press Control Z to put it back into its original position, and if we go to here and press Y, or use the Y, we can see that all of our lighting stays now, and our planet is going to stay in the background as we move through, but whenever we rotate, the planet will kind of rotate with it, which I think will look pretty cool. And we can just fly through all of these objects as we fly through, and we'll get to the end. Let's just see what's at the end, right? There's a dead end at the end, so we'll probably stop around here somewhere where we can see that sort of landscape at the back, and then yeah, let's try that. That might work. See, if there's a way, there's a will. If there's a will, there's a way. I think it's, yeah, that's the right way around. If there's a will, there's a way. So we want to animate this. Let's just go to edit preferences, and I'm pretty sure in here, if I remember correctly, somewhere, animation, and then default interpolation, we're going to set this to linear for now. Linear, we want it to be linear. That means it won't like slow down and speed up at the beginning and the end and do all that stuff, but we can do that with the settings inside Blender afterwards. So we're going to start animating now. Happy days, we got there in the end, but we need to figure out how long. Well, let's sort out our frame rates first. So let's see, let's go into our resolution and render settings, and we're going to run this at 30 frames a second. So let's press number 7, and to fly through that whole scene, let's say we want 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds should be enough. So what are we? 3 4s are 120. I think this is about here. Let's see. Yeah, maybe that's a bit too fast. Let's just try and animate a piece of it and see how fast it moves. Let's just start on keyframe 1. We want to select the controller. Let's just move to the first point, like over here somewhere. We just do a basic animation at the beginning. So let's just do record. Let's just move it 30 seconds or 30 frames in, and then let's just do a basic thing here for the minute and see what that looks like, see how fast it's moving. We'll go to here and make sure the record button's on, and then you just want to move it forward, right, and it's going to record that. It should create the keyframe. Let's just do let's just go back here. Let's just go to 0 frame, right click, insert keyframe here, and we'll go to here, and we're going to move it forward just to past this object. So this is not animating for some reason, which it should. So we're doing something wrong. Let's see. That should add keyframes when we move it. Let's go to here and move it forward a bit. Why are you not adding keyframes? Okay, very stupid. So I haven't used Blender for a long time, so we have to go to the location and rotation here. Let's move it to where we want it to be at the beginning. I haven't used Blender in such a long time, so let's move back a bit maybe. Let's see. I think right here, right? We don't want to go too far back because we're going to see all this business down here. We don't want that. Just move it forward. Let's turn on the record button, turn it on, and then press the letter I here, the letter I, and the letter I. Move over the rotation and press the letter I as well. Those is insert keyframes for those elements for the rotation and the location. Now we can move to frame 30, which is about 1 second, and then we can move the Y forwards through this position here. Let's just turn off the recorder, go back and click forward, and we can kind of see that moving now. I think that's a little bit fast for me. So let's grab this 30. Let's go back here. Let's left click to unselect the keyframes and drag this to 60, and then press the space bar, and we'll see what that looks like. Let's try that again. I think that's gonna be okay. Looks a bit slow, doesn't it? So let's compromise. Let's set it to around 40 frames. I think that speed is pretty good, yeah? You have to play around and experiment. I haven't used Blender for a while now, to be fair. I've been so busy with my web work, my web design, I remember. Blender's just for fun. But I think that's going to be okay. So 40 frames for that distance. So we know when we move between this object and the next one, we know we need to be about 40 frames. Should be pretty good between those distances. So we've got this here, right? And if we turn on the record button, we kind of we're okay here, right? We can pretty much fly straight forward, I guess, over this part here. We'll get to this point, and we're going to go to 80 frames, and the record button is still on. Let's just move it forward more, but we want to move it to, we can actually move it up a little bit. You can play around, it doesn't have to be always flat trajectory, right? And we want to go through this object, so let's move it forwards here and get through the object. Then we can decide what happens between these keyframes, right? So let's get to this one here. Let's just see. I want to really okay. Really, we made a mistake here. This one on. Let's undo that. I'm going to press Ctrl Z. I'm just going to keep pressing Ctrl Z until this keyframe gets removed, this 80. So then we should be back to where we was at the beginning, right? We made a bit of mistake here. So let's see. This one flies straight forward. Let's click here and here to make sure we have keyframes for that position. And if we go back, because we didn't change any of the positions here, you see, when we flew forward. So when we go to 80 now, and we'll add keyframes for all of these, then we can move forward again past this object, but we want to move it to the side like this. Maybe bring it up a little bit. Let's fly through this one. Now it's going to fly straight, but then kind of move to this side, right? You can see it's moving. So around this position here, around 60, I'm going to add keyframes for the rotation. And let's go back to frame 40 and also add keyframes for the rotation here, and add them for the 80 here rotation as well. We should in fact set keyframes for that at the beginning, which it already has. So on 60, we can rotate it on the y-axis this way a little bit, right? And we just, let's see what we rotated it to. We rotated it to 18.5. So let's go to here and rotate it a little bit more to around 20. I'm going to fly through at an angle on this one. Make sure we're on the keyframe, yeah? Make sure you're on frame 80 and then rotate it to, I think it was minus 20, wasn't it? Minus 20. Minus 20 here. So let's see. Then we can get to frame 120 and we're going to add all the keyframes in here, here, here and here, and then let's move this forward more, and we want to get it closer to this one. Let's rotate, let's bring it down a bit actually, maybe a bit, and let's rotate it back to being flat. Let's shift it to this side and let's push it through the tunnel. Let's try and get that bit centered out. Bring it up a little bit, go through the tunnel. Let's see what happens here. So now we fly through, it's going to rotate this way, then rotate this way. It's going to flatten out really. So here I want to rotate it this way around to about 15 degrees, give or take. So this bit here is a bit iffy, right? It's kind of flat and then it just rotates here. So it'd be nice if when we get past this tunnel, it's rotating this way a bit. Let's see. So now it will rotate this way and then switch back around this way, fly through, switch back around the other side, and we can rotate back when we go back through the other side, right? So let's set the rotation back to 0 for the minute. Let's shift it across to here. Let's fly through it, and then we're going to rotate it minus degrees right this way. Maybe we'll go a bit more extreme this time. Let's do it around like minus 30 roughly. And let's just hit the space bar and play it out. It's not the best, but I'm pretty sure we can improve that. We'll play around with the settings and improve it. Let's get the basic keyframes in. Kind of yeah, we'll play around with it afterwards. Let's see what we can get out of this first. So I think we're almost at the last one now, so let's go to frame 200 and let's see on this frame what it was going on here. Okay, let's add these keyframes in here. This line represents that nothing's actually changed. So whenever you see a line like this, it's telling you between this keyframe and this keyframe nothing has changed. As soon as you move it, you'll see that line will disappear. maybe we'll bring it down a bit. Let's rotate it back around to flat, and then let's move it across to this one, and we'll move it forward. We're going to rotate the planet, we'll sort that out in a minute. The planet itself will kind of end up in this scene here. Maybe we'll leave this to flatten out straight like here. Let's see what happens here now. Or what we'll do, we've got a few keyframes to play around here, so maybe a few more frames to work with. So that one's flying in. Let's see, which angle is this? This is minus, so we set this one to a positive, like not a lot, maybe about 10 degrees. Then these last few frames, just on these last few, we will shift it forward a little bit to about here, and we'll rotate it to flat like here. Let's see, I think we'll grab, let's undo that, let's grab this one, 200 to 240, let's see. Let's reduce this, there's not much distance on that last part, so that should be okay. And then we can kind of smooth this out at the beginning and the end in a moment. Let's save this for the second. Let's just see. Alright, let's go to the first keyframe. Let's click on this sphere or this planet, and we would want to rotate on the y-axis. So let's add a keyframe for that, and we finish on frame 220, right? Let's go all the way down to 220, and let's rotate this, let's say 720 degrees. Let's see. So that's wrong already. That's not great. Unless you want your planet rotating like that, which is a bit crazy. You never know. Let's see. That's not right, is it? So let's go back to the first keyframe. Let's remove it. And let's go to frame 220. Set it back to 0. Let's remove that. Let's go back to our first keyframe. We want to rotate it not on the X, it's on the Z axis, isn't it? Obviously. So let's add a keyframe for the Z. Let's set it to 220. Add another keyframe here. This is for scale. So I'm still doing this wrong. Let's undo that. Press Ctrl Z to undo it. Then click here. We'll get it right, and we'll click here again, set it to 720. So now this should rotate correctly. We can see if it's too fast. If it's rotating too fast, which it seems to be, then we can set our 220 at less, or maybe we'll try 360, so it will rotate exactly once around, and you can see it's rotating much slower now. Because it's rotating a bit too fast. So it's looking okay. I think we can improve it some more. Let's try and do something with the interpolation of these keyframes. Let's try and smooth them out and do a few bits in there. So really, to do that, we're going to need the controller. Click on the controller here. Okay, let's go ahead and click on the controller here, controller, and let's go to File, Save As, and let's just save this as another version. And let's go to let's make sure the controller is selected here. Go to Objects, and actually click here, right here, and we're going to go to Graph Editor. So in the Graph Editor, you might be zoomed in quite close, so use your mouse wheel to zoom right out. Left click and select all of the keyframes. You need to make sure you select all of them. So let's select all of these keyframes. All of them have been selected, and we want to key the interpolation mode. So you can press the letter T to access that information. So press T, and here as default we set it as linear. The reason why we set it as linear is because we didn't want the planet to kind of like gradually speed up and then gradually slow down. We just want the planet to spin. But we can set the Bezier curve here, Bezier curve, and you can see that it's slowly curving in and out. So it's going to gradually smooth out the controller, right, as it's flying through the scene. So now we'll go back to the viewport and we click play. We ain't gonna have like this sort of, you know, abrupt angle movement. So it's going to be a lot smoother as it transitions through this through the curves. So when we click play now, you can see it's a lot smoother when it flows through these objects. Now I can see there's one problem here. Let's just go back to here, and we kind of fly right through this rock, which is not great. So if we turn on our keyframe in, maybe what we'll do is let's get to around here, and let's set keyframes for these elements, and let's try and shift it maybe to about here. So it will fly through this gap instead, right? So as it goes through, it's going to fly through this gap here. It looks pretty good. It's going to fly through here, and we're going to end up here on our last scene. So what we might do is click on the planet and drag this keyframe all the way to 250. So that way when we stop at the end, the planet keeps spinning, and you can fade to black or do whatever you want to do towards the end. So you can go and animate other stuff in here. You could animate the lighting as well if you wanted to, the light objects over here. So maybe we'll try and do that on one of the objects, not all of them. So let's have a little bit of fun and animate that as well. Let's try that. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but let's just save this, and let's take the middle spotlight, right? The middle one, we'll change that color as we fly through the scene. Let's try and do that. Maybe we'll go from like a purple to a different color, and if it doesn't work, we'll just leave it as purple. So we're on the record button. We've got the record button here. Let's go over to the lighting, and in the color we can click here to add a keyframe, right? And we can go all the way down to 250, and maybe actually 220 would be better. 220. We can add another keyframe, and we can change its color to, let's say, maybe to a red. Let's see what will look good. Will look crazy. Blue looks nice as well. They all look nice, don't they? Let's see. Maybe like a blue. No, maybe not. Let's see. Let's try maybe like an orange or dark red. I think red looks pretty good. So now this light is going to transition between those colors. So as we fly through, gradually it should be working its way to a red color, I believe. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will just change red right towards the end. It has to be transitioning here somewhere, right? So maybe what we'll do is grab this keyframe and drag it much closer to 100 frame. So we'll start off at purple. We should get to red a lot quicker now. Here you can see the red. It's up to you, you don't have to do that. Let's just play it out and see what it looks like. Okay, I did notice one thing. Let's just stop this. I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't like that, so I'm just going to right click on this and delete this keyframe and just leave it all purple. I think purple is fine. I think it looks fine. But I did notice that the planet doesn't spin at the beginning, like the good 20 frames or something. So maybe we've made a mistake there. Let's click on the planet itself. You can see the keyframe is set to 30 here. So right now the planet is still, we don't want that. We want it to animate all the way from the beginning. So let's just undo that. If I move forward a few frames, you can see the planet isn't spinning, right? Until it gets to this frame here, frame 31, then it starts to spin, which is a bit rubbish. So let's set that to the first keyframe. Then it will start to spin straight away. Okay, I think we're pretty much done. I mean, we can play around with the settings a little bit more. Maybe in the volumetric lighting, in the shading here, you can play around with the strength. You can change this setting right to darken it right down. You can brighten it right up. You can have it like this sort of scene where it's not so you know, dark. Maybe you like that. That looks pretty cool as well. Nice for you to go and experiment with the different settings and play around with it to get it to how you want it to look, right? You can also click on the, let's just set that back again because I don't really want that. Let's just bring that down to 0.05. You can play around with the settings in here as well, like the density. You can play around with these settings to see what works for you as well here. It's just a case of playing around with the settings and see how you want your scene to look inside Blender. Maybe this density, we can bring it right down. And just get this lighting just right how we want it. Yeah, so play around with the settings. There's nothing to say this is the right setting. It's down for you to experiment with it and see what works for you, right? There's no perfect answer to this question. It can be whatever you want, and you can play around with these settings here as well to change the colors of the lighting in here as well. Just by rotating it around, you can make it brighter, darker. Just play around with the settings. Try and get it to something quite creative. That's our goal. I'm going to leave it down here somewhere in the center point. Bring this down to about here. I want it to be quite dark like this. I think that's how I like it. You go and play around with it and see what else you can do. With the land itself, you can click on the land and you can go to the modifier and you can add a subsurface, subdivide it, and that will add some more detail. You can see there's more detail in there now. So if I remove it, I don't know if you can just like kind of disable it. Let's see. Don't think you can. If I remove it, you'll see the land like this, and if you add the subsurface division, in the viewport is set to 1, so you can set that to 2, and then you'll get more detail, but that's in the viewport, right? If you set this too high, then it's going to start to lag. So in the render, you can set it to like 3, and then press F12 and check how it renders. And if you like that, that's kind of an option as well, but you have to apply that to all 3 of them. So I would advise you apply the subsurface division because you're going to get much more detail, and it's going to look, the rocks are going to look a lot smoother, and everything's going to look a lot better in the scene itself. So you need to apply that to all 3 of them. So you click on this one, you can subdivide that as well, set the viewport to 2 and set the render to 3, and then do that for the 3rd one as well. Set it to 2 and set it to 3. I think we're pretty good. What you'll find though is when you subdivide, you might lag a little bit your frame rates and stuff, yeah? So you have to just be aware of that. mine's pinging at 30 frames a second, so you can see the frame rate at the top here when you're rendering in real time. You can see the frame rate there as well. Up in this top corner it's around 28 frames a second running, so should be okay. And just turn off the overlays in here and any sort of options in here, just these two really, and you can see your scene rendering that in real time and see what it looks like. And you can just pause on a frame, press F12, and you can see the proper render, what it was going to look like when you render a full frame. Just give that a second. It didn't work. Let's save this before it crashes on me, and let's try again. F12. Here you go. So you can see the render, the actual final render is going to look much better than the actual viewport in here. Yeah. So I actually might go and render this animation out. I quite like it, so I'm going to go and render this out. It's going to take some time to do that, to be fair. So let's go ahead and save this. I'll render it out. Maybe I'll do a little bit of work in Premiere Pro as well, and then we can watch this video at the end. Maybe I add some little sound effects and stuff and have a little bit of fun in Premiere Pro as well. And that's pretty much the end of this tutorial. So this is like a little Lost Planet tutorial. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. Hopefully you'll find something and learn something new from this as well. I've learned a few new things today by making this tutorial. I haven't used Blender for a while, to be fair, but it's just a fun tool to use, isn't it? It's good for doing like abstract stuff like this. If you really want to do like technical stuff and like accurate stuff, then you know that's not really what I'm into. I'm into just having fun. That's all Blender is for me. I'm a web designer, so this is my break from website design and writing code and doing graphics. It's nice to learn something a bit different, right? Okay, let's go ahead and save this work. I'm going to go and render this out a little bit later, and I'll do something in maybe Premiere Pro, maybe do some transitions, or at least do fade to black, and then maybe add some audio, maybe even put some possibly some text at the end, right? Maybe we could do like a Lost Planet text or something in Premiere Pro, almost like a little intro for a film or something. We can consider it to be, right? Something nice like that. So go and play around with it. If you do something good, don't forget to upload it to Instagram and then share it with me, right? Tag me on Instagram, and if I like what I see, I'll give you a little thumbs up. I'm pretty sure it will look pretty cool. So do upload your animations to Instagram. I'd love to see them. You can see me on I believe my Instagram is at DCP Web Designers. If you check the YouTube description, I'll put my Instagram tag in there as well. I'll also add all the HDR maps that we downloaded, links to those. And that's the end of this tutorial. So let's go ahead and close this. Quite epic, good fun. That's what it's all about. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next DCP Web tutorial. Stay safe and have fun.